Washington is building a top-tier offensive line in the Big Ten.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the days. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well. So you notice when we post a new show, plus if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers out there today. We're going to spend some time on recruiting, just as we are all week, and we're gonna play this game early. Who will be the first 2027 commit as we continue to wait on that. We're also going to spend some time talking about the trenches in the 26 class along the defensive line, and we're also going to talk about it on the offensive line here because we just got back from Jedd Fisch's press conference on Monday. And one of the things that he mentioned was he sees some tackle in John Mills' future, just tying, what's going on right now with the future. And he said, yeah, there's certainly a good chance he moves out there. And, we'll see what happens moving forward from there because Washington's got, as he said, since he can't say their names, a couple of really exciting offensive line and tackle prospects coming in the 26 class. So I look at the offensive line right now. I love where it is with Carver Willis and John Mills back. And I look at where it can be 12 months from now. And this could be truly one of the best units in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it makes me think back to when I saw Dom Harris on the field after the game. I just kind of had to wait a second. I'm like, wow, you are massive.
I saw him in the stands before the game too. And I had the same thought. Yeah.
So actually, ironically, I got a little video clip of him standing next to Michael Switzer. And I was just like, yeah, we can work with this. And I think that's where you're looking at the projectability, thinking no matter where these guys end up lining up, we talk about Kodi Greene. Could he kick out the tackle or is it going to be John Mills? Probably Mills, but you run with whatever scenario you want to. You are in so good position that I don't think when we look in the season, we're thinking you have a solid 5. You have Landon, Carver, all the guys we mentioned throughout the year. But you go into 26, 27 and beyond, like the amount of versatility on this line is truly insane. When you think about the depth that they're going to have and the experience that those guys are going to be coming and competing for, you're in a good position no matter who ends up winning those jobs.
No, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing, right? Where we look at it right now. And as you said, I think this line is solid and there's not a lot of depth, which was, evident after the injuries to Carver and John more so where like, Kodi Greene now has been awesome filling in, and I feel like we're going to see more and more of him as the year goes on, but it's just so clear what Washington has in those guys right now. And as this line continues to grow, Landon, Guerin, Party has been one of the most improved offensive linemen in the Big Ten. I've a couple of thoughts there that I want to get to in a second here, but I look at this unit as a whole, and it's exactly what you'd want from a unit taking a year 2 jump from where it was last year with the personnel, the issues, when we were out there for spring practice and there were garbage cans in place of offensive linemen because you just didn't have enough bodies. Like all of those things, it's nice to see where this unit is and knowing it's going to keep getting better, knowing you still have a guy like Champ Talea waiting in the wings and whatever could happen with some of these other exciting young prospects. Like, I look at a guy like Justin Hilkemar, David Boyajian, Jack Schaefer being another one. There are some young offensive linemen who, looking at what Michael Switzer has been able to do with Party, it should give you a lot of hope that moving forward, whatever Washington wants to do on the offensive line. And Jedd Fisch spent some time during his press conference today talking about Jonas Savanaya, Wendell Moy, these guys that he helped get into these positions, not just Michael Switzer, who was there in 2022, but some of these other just offensive line prospects that he and this coaching staff have developed over the course of their careers. It's a really exciting thought, and just knowing that you're going to continue recruiting at a high level, not just Dom Harris, but Kodi Greene as well. Seeing where this offensive line can be in 12 months from now, knowing especially what it takes for them to play as a freshman and what you're getting from one of those guys right now, I think it's a really exciting thought.
Yeah, when you think about Big Ten football and the offensive line, you talk about stacking classes, and like you mentioned with playing freshmen, it's very rare that you have a John Mills where he's a plug and play and happens to play more than 6 games and start more than 6 games. But when you look at each year, you have the Jack Shapers of the world and you mix in those guys to where you don't have a significant drop off. You want to keep those guys around 2-3 years. Now, traditionally before the NIL era, before the transfer portal era, it was a lot easier to do that. You go back and, I don't want to say old heads, shall we say, but, you go back in the day where, hey, John James and, even the new heads, ISO era in the 2000s, you had guys being able to stick around 2-3 years and you just developed them year in, year out. So by their sophomore or junior year, they're becoming starters. That's not necessarily the world you live in today. But I think with the way Jedd runs his offense and mixes in freshmen and allows guys to get playing time, where look at a guy like Zach Henning, where I was thinking about this in the sense of Landon Hatchett, who's his replacement, let's say next year, if he were to, he's not going to, I would assume, but let's say he declares for the draft and he goes on, or even next year after 26. Who's his replacement? Well, Zach Henning is a guy where he's just kind of that Jared Hilbers-esque, where you just get him enough starts or enough reps at certain positions where he's kind of your plug-and-play guy at a number of different positions, and maybe he lines up at center. And I think you look at that projectability to think, well, no matter if it's somebody from the 26 class or it's somebody currently on the roster, you have enough options to where there's not a darn, now we got to go and get somebody in the portal because so-and-so decided to declare for the draft and we don't really have confidence in the guys behind them. When you develop those guys in and year out for 2 or 3 years, that's why you have the belief that you do, that you're going to be able to be fine no matter what, because you've been able to see the growth. And Drew Azzopardi being a junior, he could come back for another year. So you don't have to rush Kodi Greene or Dom Harris, whoever you want to pick in that scenario, into the right tackle position. You have enough options no matter which way you go about it.
And I think it kind of does go just beyond like the Kodi Greene thing, because I think no matter what, that guy is just, with how big and athletic he is and how well he moves at his size right now, there's no way you're keeping him off the field next year. It's just more of a question of where's he going to play? What's that going to look like? And it's one of those things where, it goes back to the stacking classes. And since we wanted to make sure we hit on a lot of these recruiting points this week, that's one thing that this coaching staff has just done so well since it arrived, is right now the 26 class is sitting at number 18 in the country, according to the 247 composite. Like this is a really strong class. And I think that these things are only just going to get better. I feel like there are some jumps we're going to see from some guys in this class that could push it a little bit higher. Probably going to get to some late additions. We'll get to that in a minute here too. Like, I think Dominic Harris is somebody who absolutely deserves a 4th star. I think there are a couple other guys that Washington has committed right now that could see similar jumps to just not only increase the class average, but it's one of those things when you do look back on this in a year or two and, Dominic Harris is contributing at, right guard, right tackle, whatever it might be. And Kodi Greene is playing wherever he is. And you still have Paki Finau and Champ Talialia, whoever you have at center. Like and the fact that we're talking about all these guys that are, either just very quickly going to be on the roster or already here is a really nice thought, because when you look at just what Jedd Fisch wants to do on the offensive side of the ball, it's just always going to be just having a nice mobile quarterback who can get outside the pocket, do so many different things. But it's also going to be about establishing the run and going downhill. Look at the guys you have committed in this class, and Brian Bonner, Dre Pollard. We'll see what ends up with his, position once he gets here. And Sione as well. You've got a bunch of just really talented guys that can play this Big Ten brand of football that you really want to, but you're also integrating this old Pac-12 style offense where you can do so many different things in the passing game. And as we've seen so far through however many Big Ten conference games it's been, 9 last year and 5 this year, 14, whatever, I'm trying to do quick math on the fly here. Whatever it's been, we've seen that is working and working really, really well for this team. And as that continues to blend, as long as the offensive line is there, there's no reason that Washington can't be one of the best teams in the Big Ten on a year in, year out basis.
Exactly. That's why you build it through the high school recruiting ranks, where you can try and do it through the portal every year. But like we talked about, Drew Azzopardi took him basically a year to hit. Last season was his first true year in big time football. Only started 5-6 games at San Diego State the previous year, and you can't really count that. So you look at same thing with Max on the left side, where he had some playing experience at the JUCO level, but it wasn't what you needed. You're leveling up each year, and I think that's why when we talk about Jedd emphasizing high school recruiting, it's so important not to just get 1 or 2 guys that you can lean on, but the Adion Yangs of the world, where that might not be a guy that you're even thinking about. What does he look like 24 months from now? But you still take those guys to give you the depth, give you the potential to, if you have an injury here or there, or if somebody decides to surprisingly transfer, you're no longer short-staffed or short-handed to at a number of positions, because Yang obviously identifies more as a guard in the situation here. But no matter where you're looking, you can play him pretty much anywhere. And by the way, if you're overstacked at one position, maybe you flip him to the defensive side where we know he could also play, at least at the high school level. But no matter what you're looking at in terms of position from left tackle to right tackle and in between, I'm not sure there's a cause for concern at any position, no matter what happens with the rest of the class. But, like you mentioned, there's certainly going to be some potential movement there.
I like where you're going with that, but let's switch sides here because Washington wants to add another defensive lineman or two at the end of the 2026 class. So let's dive into some names, how that might come about, and if they may have to wait for the portal. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So as we look at the defensive side, I don't think we've talked about this since David Schwartzel committed to Stanford, which is something that I wasn't terribly shocked by, I must say, where Washington certainly made a push. I just think that Stanford made a bigger one, and I think some of that might go back to evaluations over the summer and some different things like that. So I'm curious to see how that one plays out, because speaking of Washington's evaluations, there are a couple of guys out there right now where I look at Anthony Jones as the number one, where if you want to go out and add one more interior guy, I feel like that's the one that you want to prioritize. Obviously, former defensive line commit from UCLA who backed off after the coaching change. So I look at him and I'm interested, and I feel like Washington, if there's a chance to get him, you take him, and then you still want to add transfer guys on top of that to round out the interior. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think you have to take a bit of both, where you can make your shot at Anthony Jones, obviously, for Crean Lutheran. You're worth exploring that option, but I think without a doubt, they're going to go find at least one body in the portal. Like, I don't see a way that they don't, even if you take Jones, I don't see a way they don't take a portal player. The question becomes, how many years of eligibility does that player have left? Is this a Sebastian Valdez situation, or is it I don't want to say Jonte Cook, but because again, just in terms of a guy with multiple years of eligibility left, because like Omari Evans only has the 1 year and things like that. Maybe a Buda, where you can have him for multiple years, like that type of scenario where you want a guy that you at least have 2 years with at minimum. I don't think you can find it. You're not going to luck in and find a guy with 3+.
So I don't think that that's going to be the main point of concern, because I know it's something I've talked about a couple times on here before, is Washington is losing 11 scholarship defensive linemen just in terms of graduation over the next 2 years. So I don't think it's going to be a matter of, we want to be picky and choosy about this guy with 2, this guy with 1. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I just think that that's something that I just feel needs a little bit of clarification. And also it's something that I've heard now a time or two from some people around the program, because that's not the way they're looking at it. I think it's just a matter of, where is the talent? How can you get more of it? And what's that going to look like? Because if, an example is like a Derek Harmon. If a Derek Harmon comes available, he's a guy with 1 year left. You get a player like that. I know, shocker, right? But if there are some other players that, maybe have some high upside and you really like your evaluation and it's still just 1 year left, maybe it's a Sebastian Valdez where it's an FCS jump, or maybe it's someone who is a G4 or G5, just kind of call up like Ontario Thompson. No matter where it's coming from, I know that's another guy with 1 year. I was trying to think of somebody with 2 or 3, but there was just no name that came to me off the top of my head. No matter what that looks like, I think it's just a matter of getting more talent in the program and just more guys that you can have as part of this rotation. And I like that Javon Parker is going to be a much bigger part next year as he continues to get healthy. Bryce Butler, Elenius Davis, Omar Khan. You still have a whole bunch of names along the interior that can give you something, but there is always room to go out and upgrade through the transfer portal, through the high school recruiting, because T.I. Mukais and Derek Coleman-Brusa are going to play next year. We know that. We know that's going to be part of this. And no matter what this unit looks like, I just think that there are so many opportunities to go out and upgrade. And I think this coaching staff understands this, and not in a way of, we want to wait for the transfer portal. We're going to moneyball this person. We're going to lowball over here. We're going to go hard after this guy. And if we miss, we miss. I don't think that that's the case with any of this. I look at the way this class has played out, where they certainly stuck to their evaluations, which I respect. And I think that's a completely fair way to go about this. But in order to make that more fair, you have to go out and pay top dollar in the transfer portal to get whoever the top available interior guy might be. Because I look at like a game this past Saturday against Illinois, who had one of the worst offensive lines in the conference coming in. You didn't get a single sack, and it really didn't feel like Luke Altmaier was under that much pressure. I know Jedd Fisch said during his presser on Monday that there were like 5 or 6 almost sacks and that he wants to see those plays be made. But you should be able to have more than just 5 or 6. You should be able to put pressure on opposing quarterbacks consistently, especially with an offense that's operating at such a high level. If you're able to create an extra possession on a strip sack, or you're just able to get teams off the field quicker because of what you're able to do up front, like all the truly elite teams in college football do, that just elevates you even further.
Okay, I'm really glad you hit on the point of the truly elite teams, because as much as we disagree that Washington not being ranked in the top 25 is ludicrous, that might be the point that we need to hit on here, where you're going to these games with conviction, with an assurance of saying, we have the best unit along this, this position, that position, X, Y, and Z. You have a great secondary, a solid linebacking core, pretty decent defensive line. Why not check all those boxes to say, you know what, we have the best defensive line in this game. We have the best linebacking core in this game. That's really what you're driving at, because to me, you're looking at, you mentioned Derek Harmon. Why not get a guy like him and a Bryce Butler or an Interior Thompson, where you get both?
Exactly.
And that's kind of what you need to do, because leave no doubt, because you have the right scheme. I think, certainly Ryan Walters should be back next season. I don't think he's going to jump. I mean, I know Illinois fans after the game were saying, hey, can we bring Ryan Walters back? Yeah, I don't think he's not going to sign up for that job at this point. There's no reason for him to do so. And I think to that point, Washington has the resources. I think we've hit home that enough to say, why not spend the money that you need to spend the resources that you need to spend, because, having Javon back is great. Having Omar Khan, but you still don't know exactly what that's going to look like, because Javon coming back off the injury, even this year, has not come back as quickly maybe as we might have thought. And then Omar, maybe he doesn't. I'm just saying, maybe he doesn't take that next step like we could envision.
No, that's fair. I'm not surprised that it's taking as long. I prefer it this way. I think that's a much better idea.
And I agree, but I'm just saying in terms of like when he comes back next year, maybe there's still more rust and things like that. Why not give yourself no out? Like we talked with Jedd on offense, he's not giving himself an out. Stack the classes, stack the bodies, and if anybody it gets left out of the mix, so be it, because you're more than taken care of in that position.
So I like where you're going with all that. There's something else that we need to bring up that has just really been lacking in this department, and it's a lack of pressure off the edge. That is something that, Ryan Walters is doing a good job of scheming up what this defense is. We've clearly seen improvements from that unit this season, especially compared to, where you have been the last couple of years. You need just a true game-wrecking edge. And if you can find one in the transfer portal, that's awesome. You go pay whatever that person is asking, plus even more, because that's what all the other teams are going to be doing as well. I'm interested in one particular high school name, and I'm throwing this out there, and I'm not trying to start a rumor. I'm just putting this name out there because this is where Washington has shown interest, and we know what's going on over there. Carter Gooden, the 4-star edge rusher from Massachusetts, who's committed to UCLA. I'm very interested in this kid because the tape is really good. You go watch it. He's got the bend you're looking for. He's a really nice athlete and is exactly what you need in a Big Ten edge rusher. But he's also committed to UCLA right now. So if there's anything you can do to, pay up, whatever it might be, to try to get a kid like that on campus, we're seeing these flip targets emerge. We saw Kakua Umua on campus this past weekend, who's committed to Florida. Like, we know those conversations are happening with certain kids. That's why I want to be very clear. I am not starting a rumor. I'm not saying I'm hearing anything on that front, but that's the kind of player that if you really want to take this class from being a really solid one to truly elite, you go out and you get a player like that who's ranked in the top 100 overall on 247 Sports as well.
I mean, I love where you're going with that. I just wonder, cause I think you're absolutely right in terms of the fit and position style and all those types of things. I just wonder where's the gap between Goodman and Tristan Gibbons? Can you bridge that gap a little bit? Because you're not getting Tristan Gibbons either. Let me make that very clear. So you're going to
I'm curious what you mean when you say the gap between those two guys in terms of talent.
What talent, fit, ability to get? Because like when you talk about a guy being committed to UCLA, why are you not already in the mix? Like, what is UCLA doing that you're not? I guess
They got in really early there. That was the thing.
Okay, because I think now if you're playing catch up, those are the guys where I could see that being a fit. Because UW was the reason why I bring up Gibbons. You have the relationship angle that UCLA seems to have with Gibbons. So I just wonder, like, where can you find that gap that you don't have to already bridge enough? Because when you're talking about, you only have 2 months until a signing, they call it 3 months maybe until you want to go in February. You don't really have a ton of room to play catch up unless you're going to overspend. And so we know UW's not going to overspend, at least unless you're in the transfer portal. So just where are those guys going to be coming from? I think that's just the thing to ponder as we look over the next month or two.
Speaking of where guys coming from, when is this first 2027 commit coming and who's it going to be? We're going to make some predictions on the other side of the break. Right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. The app makes it super simple. You can even see the exact view from your seat before buying. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Lars, as we look at these 2027 kids, we're still waiting. We've made some predictions on who it's going to be. I'm sure we're going to bring up a lot of those same names right here. I've got 3 or 4 written down that I wanted to get through. One guy who I saw on the sidelines on Saturday that I feel like Washington is in a good spot with and making a big push for, and truly could be the first one to pop, and then there's going to be a real nice ripple effect from there, is 4-star quarterback Sione Kaho from Lincoln High School down in Tacoma.
I was going to say, we didn't talk about who these guys could be, but that was kind of the guy that came to mind for me, where the quarterback is usually one of the ones you try and get first. Obviously, this class didn't, come exactly like that, but I think especially being an in-state guy, and you look at the other guys you want to keep in this state, Sione Kaho makes the most sense. And I initially thought, going back to the summer, that maybe he would look elsewhere because he obviously had interest going, way back to Washington. Definitely. But I just thought, when you look at the class and how things are stacking up, maybe you take a kid from California, maybe Arizona, just looking at some of the numbers and offers and things like that. But the interest that he's shown, kind of as you started to ramp up his recruitment, kind of ramp up and wind down in a sense, I really feel good about where Washington stands with him. And I think if he ends up being, let's say, one of the first 3, I certainly would not be surprised. I'm just curious, is he going to be the guy, or do you get the protector and then the quarterback? Like that to
I'm
me
assuming
is
you're
where,
talking about Reese Russell.
Exactly. That was the other name that came to mind for me, where from Valor Christian, that was always going to be the guy for me to be the first one, just because when you talk to recruits, and we've both done this for years now, you just get a sense from guys that even if you're taking other visits, you might as well be silently committed and then eventually make it public. That's always kind of been the guy for me, where I'm kind of still waiting for him to be the first, but Sione Kaho is quickly caught up to him in the race to be the number 1 guy.
So, and one of the things with Kaho is it's just, you always want to build around a quarterback, because one name that I've heard a lot of good things about, and I think Washington is really making a big push for, is 4-star wide receiver Braylon Pope from Sumner High School. This is another guy where I look at what he brings to the table, and he just, it's a lazy comp for, us, but it's also makes the most sense, is he looks a lot like Denzel Boston. He's got a similar frame. He moves the same way. And it's a really exciting thought, because if you're able to just package those guys together, all of a sudden, not only is that a really nice way to start the class with a whole lot of talent, but it's a whole lot of local talent at positions, I don't want to say that are of the greatest need right now, but are just so critical to what Jedd Fisch is building and what Jedd Fisch wants to do. So I look at both those guys, and we know that there's a whole lot of talent in state in the class of 2027. I'm sure those are things we're going to get to later this week on the show as well. But I just think that those 2 guys in particular are going to be great building blocks, because I look at some of these other in-state names that I think Washington is going to make a significant push for, whether it be Tevita Nonu, Jacova Doyle. I like Maurice Williams at Graham Kapowson a whole lot too. Zach Albright, who's on campus this weekend as well from Glacier Peak. There are a lot of really talented names in the area. And if they see, the big time quarterback from the area is going there, obviously the number one wide receiver in the state is staying home as well. Yeah, those are things that will resonate with a lot of these kids. And then all of a sudden, like, I know it's about dominating the West Coast and not just the state of Washington, but if you're able to get all of that motion to start off in the state, it's something that can really just help you as you do try to go down into Oregon for somebody like Josiah Molden, down into California for a Troy Bowens, a Cassie Currie, who apparently had a tremendous time on his visit over the weekend. Whoever it might be, all of a sudden, it all is a ripple effect. And that's something that I think Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff have done a really good job of early on, is making sure that they can sell and get themselves in a good position with a lot of these high-end names. And if all of these blue chip local guys are staying home to start off this cycle, I think it's really going to resonate with a lot of the kids down in California, especially.
And also Arizona. I think that's kind of the other state that obviously we know Jedd has a real good tie-in with. And I think you look at, the guys that they've offered in that state, Noah Roberts being one, Jake Hildebrand being another one. At some point, it's a question of when that first one comes, it's almost going to be like 4 or 5 others are going to follow. And, looking at the 247, top 5 guys in the state of Washington, there's no reason why you shouldn't clean up the top 5.
Sure.
I don't see an argument. I mean, there's an argument to be made, sure. But, Tevita Nonu, that was a guy you were in on early as one of your first 10 offers. You look down the list. Sione Kaho has been, for years now, known in the University of Washington program. Obviously, his brother, Ali Kaho, we know that history. And you just go down the list where if you can clean up the top 5 guys in state, that sets your class up so much more to be not selective, but then you can kind of wait on some of those either evaluations, or if guys want to prolong their recruitment, shall we say, where if you're able to get Doyle, Reese Russell, call it, I'm trying to think of who the third offensive lineman could be, you can decide, do we take 4 or 5, whatever that number ends up being. You're in such a good position to where you're not stressing about, hey, we need to now offer this guy and that guy, where we still see offers flying out. But if you notice, the offers are in the 28 class, not as much in the 27 class, because I think staff knows they've built those early inroads with so many guys that they're not really pressing for some of those other guys, where if you're not getting the guy right now, oh, wait, maybe we should start offering them because you have such a good relationship with them.
So one guy, if you want to talk about another offensive lineman that I am really interested in, down from the state of Arizona, who just moved there ahead of the season, is DeJon Yarborough. That's another guy who I think this coaching staff is very, very high on. Unfortunately, I know he announced on Twitter that he suffered a season-ending injury. I believe he said a fractured ankle or something. So that's really unfortunate, but that's a guy who this coaching staff is absolutely enamored with. And he's got the athleticism to play tackle, play guard, and the size as well. 6'5", 340. He is just another massive individual. I'm really interested to see how the offensive line class is going to play out, but where I'm honestly the most interested right now, because UW is just generating so much interest from so many big name guys. One from the state of Arizona being Mikhail Davis. And then you look in California, I know I mentioned Josiah Molden a minute ago as well, with some of these big time names from the Trinity League. Like Aaron Washington, who is on campus over the weekend for an unofficial visit from Mater Dei. Isala Asa Wiliava, who we've talked about, that has a crystal ball to Washington as well. There are so many big-time defensive backs that the Huskies are interested in, and I think this Ryan Walters scheme is just really starting to resonate with some of these kids as well, because you look at what Tacario Davis has been able to do this year in limited playing time, how Dylan Robinson has developed really early in his career, Rylan Dillard Allen as well. No matter what, I think that Washington is going to continue to be a place where, especially as long as John Richardson is around, because I feel like he's going to be someone that there's going to be some defensive coordinator interest there sooner rather than later, as I know you've talked about a lot. Washington is going to recruit the secondary at a very, very high level. And this is a year where you're adding 5-6 guys in the 26 class. You can look at 27 and say, yeah, we'll take 3 or 4 and be really selective on who we want. But you can also just say, oh, there are, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 more really high-end guys that want to come here. Why are you going to turn that down? And just with the way things are trending with some of these top names, I think it's starting to go in that direction.
And I think it's worth kind of adding, because I don't disagree about the Richardson point. That's why you go and get a guy like Taylor Mays when you did, so that he's able to develop those relationships. And you see what he's done with Alex McLaughlin, Rylan Dillard Allen. You go down the list of guys that Taylor Mays has worked with and had success with already in his Washington career. So to me, I think, obviously, Jay Rich does, go elsewhere for a D coordinator job. That would obviously be a loss, but it's not as much of a loss given that you're able to build these relationships with Taylor Mays and, Brian Walter sticking around as well. So I think I absolutely agree that you have the ability to not be selective per se, but kind of just, almost in a way have your pick. Because when you're looking at the guys, especially on the West Coast, the further east you go, different discussion, but obviously with Jedd and things like that, you don't want to go east. It's worry about the West Coast for now. I think Asa Williams is a perfect example of a guy where, to me, another example, you don't need to miss on that guy. We talk about T.I.U. McKice, like that's the defensive back version of T.I.U. McKice for me in this 27 class, where you're in on him early on. He really likes the program. I don't want to say Trent McDuffie-esque in terms of where my confidence level is for him ending up at Washington, but it's kind of pretty close right near to it at this point. And I just wonder, we talk about, guys being the first to commit. I don't think he will be the first, but if he's in the top 5 guys to commit in the class, I'm not going to be surprised.
And before we get out of here, exactly what you said is why we haven't mentioned a whole lot of the defensive linemen, is because that is going to be by far the hardest position to recruit. I like where Washington sits with a lot of these guys. Troy Bowens, obviously called UW the 4-star edge rusher from Suter High School down in Northern California, called UW the leader after he was able to come up here on an unofficial visit. I'm really interested because I think that the Huskies can wind up with 3, 4, 5 high-end defensive linemen in this class, but they are certainly not going to be first. But Lars, whoever is first, they're going to hear about it right here on Locked On Huskies, as all our everydayers know out there. As always, thank you so much for being here. Thank to all you everydayers out there for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. And if you like what we have to offer, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.